Hello guys, it's Miss Coates and today I'm reading and talking to you from outside because the weather has been so nice. Remember, even though you do have to do some home learning and things, try and do as much of that as you can do outside whilst the weather is nice and if you have a garden. So we're going to carry on reading the Philosopher's Stone. I hope that you managed to write a summary of what happened so you can quickly read your summary before I jump in. And I'm going to start because we're halfway through the first chapter. A man appeared on the corner that the cat had been watching. Appeared so suddenly and silently that you'd have thought he'd just popped out of the ground. The cat's tail twitched and its eyes narrowed. Nothing like this man had ever been seen in Privet Drive. He was tall, thin, very old, judging by the silver of his hair and beard, which were both long enough to tuck into his belt. He was wearing long robes and a purple cloak, which swept the ground, and high-heeled, buckled boots. His blue eyes were light, bright, and sparkling behind the half-moon spectacles, and his nose was very long and crooked, as though it had been broken at least twice. This man's name was Albus Dumbledore. Albus Dumbledore didn't seem to realise that he had just arrived in a street where everything from his name to his boots was unwelcome. He was busy rummaging in his cloak, looking for something, but he did not seem to realise he was being watched. Sorry guys, just lost where I was. Because he looked up suddenly at the cat, which was still staring at him from the other end of the street. For some reason, the sight of the cat seemed to amuse him. He chuckled and muttered, "I should have known." He had found what he was looking for in his inside pocket. It seemed to be a silver cigarette lighter. He flicked it open and held it in the air and clicked it. The nearest street lamp went out with a little pop. He clicked it again. The next lamp flickered into darkness. 12 times he clicked the putter-outer until only lights left in the whole street were the 2 tiny pinpricks in the distance, which were the eyes of the cat. Watching him, if anyone looked out of the window now, even beady-eyed Mrs. Dursley, they wouldn't be able to see anything that was happening. I'm going to have a swap of my glasses because it can be a bit tricky to read when you're wearing sunglasses. Even beady-eyed Mrs. Dursley, they wouldn't be able to see anything that was happening down on the pavement. Dumbledore slipped the putter-outer back inside his cloak and set down the street towards number 4, where he sat down on the wall next to the cat. He didn't look at it, but after a moment he spoke to it. "Fancy seeing you here, Professor McGonagall." He turned to smile at the tabby, but it had gone. Instead, he was smiling at a rather severe-looking woman who was wearing square glasses, exactly like the shaping of the markings that the cat had around its eyes. She too was wearing a cloak, an emerald one. Her black hair was drawn into a tight bun, and she looked distinctly ruffled. "How did you know it was me?" she asked. "My dear Professor, I've never seen a cat sit so stiffly." "You'd be stiff if you'd been sitting on a brick wall all day," said Professor McGonagall. "All day? When you could have been celebrating? I must have passed a dozen feasts and parties on my way here." Professor McGonagall sniffed angrily. "Oh yes, everyone's celebrating all right," she said impatiently. "You'd think they'd be a little more careful. But no, even the Muggles have noticed. Something's going on. It was on their news." She jerked her head back at the Dursleys' dark living room. "I heard it. Flocks of owls, shooting stars. Well, they're not completely stupid. They were bound to notice something. Shooting stars down in Kent. I bet that was Deadliest Diggle. He's never had much sense." "You can't blame them," said Dumbledore gently. We've had precious little to celebrate for 11 years. I know that, said Professor McGonagall irritably, but that's no reason to lose our heads. People are being downright careless on the streets in broad daylight, not even dressed in muggle clothes, swapping rumours. She threw a sharp sideways glance at Dumbledore, here as though hoping he was going to tell her something, but he didn't. So she went on. A fine thing it would be on the very day you-know-who seems to have disappeared. The muggles find out about us. I suppose he has gone, Dumbledore. It certainly seems so, said Dumbledore. We have much to be thankful for. Would you care for a sherbet lemon? A what? A sherbet lemon. They're a kind of muggle sweet I'm rather fond of. Me too, Dumbledore. No, thank you, said Professor McGonagall coldly, as though she didn't think it was the moment for sherbet lemons. As I say, even if you know who has gone, my dear Professor, surely a sensible person like you can call him by his name. All this you-know-who nonsense for 11 years. I've been trying to persuade people to call him by his proper name. Voldemort. Professor McGonagall flinched, but Dumbledore was unsticking 2 sherbet lemons. Seemed not to notice. It gets so confusing if we keep saying you-know-who. I've never seen any reason to be frightened of saying Voldemort's name. I know you haven't, said Professor McGonagall, sounding half exasperated. Not said quite well there. Half exasperated. There we go. Half admiring. But you're different. Everyone knows you're the only one you know. Oh, right. Voldemort was frightened of. You flatter me, said Dumbledore calmly. Voldemort had powers I will never have. Only because you're too, noble to use them. It's lucky it's dark. I haven't blushed so much since Modern Pomfrey told me she liked my new earmuffs. Professor McGonagall shot a sharp look at Dumbledore and said, the owls are nothing to the rumours that are flying around. You know what everyone's saying, and why he disappeared, and what finally stopped him. It seemed that Professor McGonagall had reached the point she was most anxious to discuss. The real reason she'd been waiting on a cold, hard wall all day. For neither as a cat nor as a woman had she fixed Dumbledore with such a piercing stare as she did now. It was plain, for whatever everyone was saying, she was not going to believe it until Dumbledore told her the truth. Dumbledore, however, was choosing another sherbet lemon and did not answer. What they are saying, she pressed on, is that last night Voldemort turned up in Godric's Hollow. He went to find the Potters. The rumour is that Lily and James Potter are that they're dead. Dumbledore bowed his head. Professor McGonagall gasped. Lily and James! I can't believe it! I didn't want to believe it! Oh, Albus! Dumbledore reached out and patted her on the shoulder. I know, he said heavily. Professor McGonagall's voice trembled as she went on. That's not all. They're saying he tried to kill the Potter's son, Harry, but he couldn't. He couldn't kill that little boy. No one knows why or how. They're saying that he couldn't kill Harry Potter. Voldemort's power somehow broke, and that's why he's gone. Dumbledore nodded glumly. It's true, faltered Professor McGonagall. After all the power, after all the people he's killed, he couldn't kill a little boy? It's just astounding, of all the things to stop him. But how in the name of heaven did Harry survive? We can only guess, said Dumbledore. We may never know. Professor McGonagall pulled out a lace handkerchief and dabbed at her eyes beneath her spectacles. Dumbledore gave a great sniff as he looked at a golden watch from his pocket and examined it. It was a very old watch. It had 12 hands, but no numbers. Instead, little planets were moving around the edge. It must have made sense to Dumbledore, though, because he put it back in his pocket and said, Hagrid's late. I suppose it was he who told you I'd be here, by the way. Yes, said Professor McGonagall. I don't suppose you're going to tell me why you're here, of all places. I've come to bring Harry Potter to his aunt and uncle. They're the only family he has left now. You don't mean... You can't mean the people that live here, cried Professor McGonagall, jumping to her feet and pointing at number 4. Dumbledore, you can't. I've been watching them all day. You couldn't find 2 people who are less like us. And they've got this son. I saw him kicking his mother all the way up the street, screaming for sweets. Harry Potter, come live here. It's the best place for him, said Dumbledore firmly. His aunt and uncle will be able to explain everything to him when he's older. I've written them a letter. A letter? Repeated Professor McGonagall, faintly sitting back on the wall. Really, Dumbledore? You think you can explain all of this in a letter? These people will never understand him. He'll be famous. A legend. I won't be surprised if today was known as Harry Potter Day in the future. There'll be books written about Harry. Every child in our world will know his name. Exactly, said Dumbledore, looking very seriously over the top of his half-moon glasses. It'd be enough to turn any boy's head. Famous before he can walk and talk. Famous for something he won't even remember. Can you see how much better he is growing up away from all that until he's ready to take it? Professor McGonagall opened her mouth, changed her mind, swallowed and said, Yes, you're right. Of course. But how is the boy getting here, Dumbledore? She eyed his cloak and suddenly, as though she thought he might be hiding Harry under it. Hagrid's bringing him. You think it's wise to trust Hagrid with something as important as this? I would trust Hagrid with my life, said Dumbledore. And I'm not saying his heart's not in the right place, said Professor McGonagall grudgingly. But you can't pretend he's not careless. He does tend to... What was that? A low rumbling sound had broken the silence around them. It grew steadily louder as they looked up and down the street for some sign of a headlight. It swelled to a roar. They both looked up the sky, and a huge motorbike fell out of the air and landed on the road in front of them. If the motorbike was huge, it was nothing to the man sitting astride it. He was almost twice as tall as a normal man, and at least 5 times as wide. Long tangles of bushy black hair and a beard hid most of his face. He had hands the size of dustbin lids, and his feet in their leather boots were like baby dolphins. In his vast, muscular arms, he was holding a bundle of blankets. Hagrid, said Dumbledore, sounding relieved. At last! Where did you get the motorbike? Borrowed it, Professor Dumbledore, sir, said the giant, climbing carefully off the motorbike as he spoke. Young Sirius Black lent it me. I've got him, sir. No problems, were there? No, sir. House was almost destroyed, but I got him out all right before the muggles started swarming around. He fell asleep as we were flying over Bristol. Dumbledore and Professor McGonagall bent forward over the bundle of blankets. Inside, just visible, was a baby boy, fast asleep under a tuft of jet black hair. Over his forehead, they could see curiously shaped a cut like a bolt of lightning. Is that where... whispered Professor McGonagall. Yes, said Dumbledore. He'll have that scar forever. Couldn't you do something about it, Dumbledore? Even if I could, I wouldn't. Scars can come in useful. I have one above my left knee, which is a perfect map of the London Underground. Well, give him here, Hagrid. We better get this over with. Dumbledore took Harry in his arms and turned towards the Dursley house. Could I say goodbye to him, sir? Said Hagrid. He bent his great shaggy head over Harry and gave him what must have been a very scratchy, whiskery kiss. Then suddenly Hagrid let out a howl like a wounded dog. Shh! Hissed Professor McGonagall. You'll wake the muggles. Sorry, sobbed Hagrid, taking out a large spotted handkerchief and burying his face into it. But I can't stand it. Lilith and James dead, and poor Harry off to live with muggles. Yes, it's all very sad, but get a grip on yourself, Hagrid, or we'll be found, Professor McGonagall whispering, patting Hagrid gingerly on the arm as Dumbledore stepped over the low garden wall and walked to the front door. He lay Harry gently on the doorstep and took a letter out of his coat, tucked it inside Harry's blankets, and then came back to the other two. For a full minute, the 3 of them stood there and looked at the little bundle. Hagrid's shoulders shook. Professor McGonagall blinked furiously, and the twinkling light that usually shone from Dumbledore's eyes seemed to have gone out. "Well," said Dumbledore, "finally, that's that. We've no business staying here. We may as well go join the celebrations." "Yeah," said Hagrid in a very muffled voice. "I'd best get the bark away. Good night, Professor McGonagall. Professor Dumbledore, sir." Wiping his streaming eyes on his jacket sleeve, Hagrid swung himself on the motorbike and kicked the engine into life. With a roar, it rose into the air and off into the night. "I shall see you soon, I expect, Professor McGonagall," said Dumbledore, nodding to her. Professor McGonagall blew her nose in reply. Dumbledore walked back down the street, and on the corner he stopped and took out the silver putter outer. He clicked it once, and 12 balls of light sped back into the street lamp so that the privet drive glowed suddenly orange, and he could make out a tabby cat slinking around the corner at the other end of the street. He could just see the bundle of blankets on the steps of number 4. "Good luck, Harry," he murmured, and he turned on his heel, and with a swish of his cloak he was gone. A breeze ruffled in the neat hedges of Privet Drive, which lay silently and tidy under the inky sky, the very last place you'd expect astonishing things to happen. Harry Potter rolled over inside his blankets without waking up. One small hand closed on the letter beside him. He slept on, not knowing he was special, not knowing he was famous, not knowing he'd be woken up in a few hours' time by Mrs. Dursley's scream as she opened the front door to put out the milk bottles, nor that he would spend a few weeks being prodded and pinched by his cousin Dudley. He couldn't have known at this very moment people, meeting in the secret all over the country, were holding up their glasses and saying in hushed voices, "To Harry Potter, the boy who lived." So that is the first chapter done with. And what I'd like you guys to do is I'd like you to list all of the different characters that we have met so far. Tell me which one's your favourite so far. And I hope you guys are staying safe. Remember, wash your hands and stay home. Thanks for listening.